Is there anything more frustrating than feeling like you've mastered some vocabulary only to find that one word can have multiple meanings? If you've just started learning Portuguese, you may not know it, but how you use certain words can change drastically depending on context. Confused? You won't be after watching today's video. I'm going to cover 5 common words and verbs with multiple meanings so you can make sure that you are using them correctly, not just in their usual boring way, but in an array of situations, making you sound so much more like a local. If you're excited to improve your Portuguese with me today, give me a thumbs up on this video and make sure you hit subscribe if you want free weekly lessons just like this one that will power up your Portuguese skills in a matter of minutes. So let's get down to it. So the first word that I want to cover is a verb, and it's the verb dar. Now, if you've done some study, you'll probably know that this is the verb to give. Everyone knows that. But did you know how else it can be used? One of the most common additional uses is to work. Not like going to work and doing your job, but whether something functions. So if a machine, for example, is out of order, you can say não dá. It doesn't work. I remember the first time that I said this in the ladies' loo when someone was trying to use a hand dryer that didn't work, and I felt so fluent. You can also use it when a plan isn't going to work out. So for example, if someone asks you to be somewhere and you can't make it, you can say desculpe, não vai dar. I believe this is short for like não vai dar certo, as in it's not going to turn out right. Be careful with the pronunciation of dar. Words ending in an R can be tricky and is one of the biggest mistakes I see native English speakers making when they're speaking Portuguese. When an R comes at the end of a word, it's what we call a tapped R, r, r. And most people either want to drop it off completely or use a sound like they would in English, which is incorrect. I do have a whole video on this that I will link in the description, and don't forget I do have a free pronunciation guide that you can download in the description if you need more help mastering these tricky sounds that you need to speak Portuguese well. You can even extend this to whether something will work well with something else, like whether something will go together. For example, as calças dão com a camisa. These trousers go with the blouse. Eu dou-me bem com a Maria. I get on well with Maria. Next up is the word mesmo. Now, you probably know the straightforward meaning, which is the same. Quero a mesma coisa. I want the same thing. But have you heard it in other contexts and found it a little bit confusing? Mesmo can also be used as an amplifier. So if I say aqui mesmo, I mean right here, exactly here. Or if I say gostei muito mesmo, it means that I really, really liked it. You may have heard people say isso mesmo when they mean yes, exactly. This is a great one to use to make you sound more native. Try it out and see if it impresses your friends. Another verb for you, ficar. Now, believe it or not, this verb has 5 meanings, so let's go through them one by one. The first one is to be situated. So, for example, I could say o banco fica ao lado do café. The bank is next to the cafe. We're talking about its location, its situation, and we can use ficar for that. Next one is to become. So we would often use this in a sentence for I got, for example. Fiquei muito chateada. I got really annoyed. The third meaning, to stay. For example, vou ficar em casa hoje. I'm going to stay at home today. A kind of similar but slightly different meaning is to keep. So, for example, you could say to someone, pode ficar com o troco. You can keep the change. Ficar com. This is actually one of the phrases that I give you in my 30-day practical Portuguese challenge. If you haven't checked that out yet, definitely go and watch that video and download the PDF for some really useful practical phrases for using out and about. The final meaning, which is a little less common but also really helpful to know, is to suit, when something suits you. So for example, you could say, o vestido fica-te bem. The dress suits you. Next up, jeito. This is such a typical Portuguese word. If you are not using it yet, you must get it into your vocabulary because you will sound so good if you can use it correctly. So there are a few ways that we can do that. The first is the phrase ter jeito. So this means that you have a way with something, that you are good at something, that you have a talent with something. So for example, I could say, tenho jeito com línguas, which would translate to I am good at languages or I have a talent for languages. Another way we can use it is dar jeito. This means with something working out. So this is often used when you are making plans and you want to ask the other person when works for you, when's good for you. You would say, quando te dá jeito? When does it work for you? Another handy phrase that uses jeito is when you want to say to someone, ugh, no way. De jeito nenhum. You can also call someone jeitoso, which means you think they're pretty hot. Finally, a verb I am asked about all the time, and that is the verb andar. I do a live Q&A session every week with my students, and this is something that comes up all the time. If you are interested in joining us inside the Portuguese Pro program, I would love to hear from you. I'll put details of how to join us via my free taster lesson for beginners in the description. So people usually associate this verb with walking, and that is one of the meanings, but I usually explain that andar is more abstract and can be used in more contexts. Most commonly, it suggests movement. So for example, to ride a bike is andar de bicicleta. And to go on foot is andar a pé. We could also say, for example, este carro não anda. This car doesn't work, it's not moving forward. The second most common use of andar is to be engaged in an activity. So for example, I could ask somebody, o que andas a fazer? What are you up to? Or I could say, tenho andado muito ocupado. I've been very busy recently. So there you have it, 5 words with multiple meanings. If you can master using these words in more context than just one, I guarantee your Portuguese friends will be very impressed. If you are just getting started with Portuguese and you need some help with the basics, you must come along to my free 60-minute lesson for beginners, where we will cover everything you need to get started with practical Portuguese that you're going to use every day. The link is in the description. I'll be back next week with more tips and tutorials to improve your confidence and conversation skills in European Portuguese, so I will look forward to seeing you then. Ciao for now.